In the 1940s, while working with triidobenzoic acid, a plant growth regulator, Arthur W. Galston discovered that using it on soybeans caused them to grow more rapidly. Applied in excess, the plants lost their leaves and died. This knowledge was passed to both agriculture as a means to control weeds and to the military as a means to kill the food supply of the enemy and to defoliate their hiding places. This discovery led others to invent synthetic herbicides whose accidental byproduct was dioxin, one of the most toxic substances on Earth. The unintended consequences of dioxin have changed the social, economic, and political landscape. Synthetic herbicides would revolutionize agriculture in the 1950s. They held the promise of weedless and insect-free fields and lawns. They replaced seasonal workers and helped create giant agro-businesses. In addition to herbicides, thousands of consumer products from plastics to cosmetics were the result of chlorine chemistry, and today nearly half of the jobs in the world are dependent on these products. But chlorine chemistry carries risks. An industrial accident in a Monsanto plant in Nitro, West Virginia, in 1949 exposed workers to high levels of dioxin. Within weeks, contaminated workers complained of nausea, vomiting, fatigue, and chloracne, and in the next decade there were elevated rates of cancer among the exposed. From the 50s through the 80s, similar industrial accidents occurred around the world. During the Vietnam War, herbicides became weapons of war as the United States used them to defoliate the jungles and to reduce the food supply of the enemy. However, the dioxin level in these herbicides sometimes varied up to 50 times higher than what was recommended by the manufacturer. Admiral Elmo R. Zumwalt Jr. ordered the use of Agent Orange in 1968 to defoliate jungle areas around the riverbanks in Vietnam. In charge of both the Blue and Brown Water Navies, his casualty rates were high. He was told the defoliant was safe for humans, even though by 1965, both the producing chemical companies and the military knew of the dioxin problem. Upon the execution of his order, the casualty rates dropped significantly, but at a high cost: the life of his son, who died from non-Hodgkin's lymphoma at the age of 42. From 1961 to 1971, Operation Ranch Hand sprayed nearly 12 million gallons of defoliant throughout Vietnam, and today Vietnam has an estimated 1 million Agent Orange victims, of which 150,000 are children. Around 2.8 million Americans served in Vietnam, and within that group, rare diseases are more frequent than in the public at large. For years, the VA denied there was a link between dioxin contamination and those diseases, but after exhaustive research, they were forced to admit a connection.
My name is John Kelly Clark, and I'm 61 years old. I was in Vietnam in 1969 and 1970, February of 69 to February of 70. And I spent that time in the active Air Force. I worked in an airlift control element, and at the time I was there, I was the rank of a sergeant. Probably when, the generation that I'm a part of, I was in Vietnam when I was 21. My situation, the multiple myeloma wasn't diagnosed for 41 years.
Right.
And it is not a curable disease. I've had a stem cell transplant. It will reoccur. If I'm in good enough health, I can do it again. But in all reality, it's terminal. So you're looking at, this generation, they're probably now in their early 60s to mid 60s. And give them, another 15, 20 years and there probably won't be much living evidence. I'm not bitter about it. I actually am, to some degree proud I served. I don't have complete faith in the government and, the military, but by the same token, I just move on.
Non-combat areas were not exempt. Billy Shoecraft of Globe, Arizona, died of cancer in 1976, but not before she and several others had waged a successful legal battle against the Dow Chemical Company and the U.S. Forest Service. In 1969, the U.S. Forest Service, in conjunction with the Salt River Project, sprayed 3,680 pounds of Silvex and 120 pounds of 2,4,5-T on Kellner Canyon and Russell Gulch in the Tonto National Forest to increase runoff to the Salt River. The spray drifted several miles from its initial target, and in subsequent years, residents in this area have reported higher than normal incidence of soft tissue sarcoma, Hodgkin's disease, and non-Hodgkin's lymphoma.
I'm Robert T. McCusick, and I was here when the government sprayed Agent Orange on our home and our canyon and on the mountain above us, 2,000 acres, and I've been here ever since. About 1968, why the government announced that they were the local forest ranger put a notice in the paper that they were going to spray about 2,000 acres of the Pinal Mountains, which are right south of us, with Agent Orange, but they didn't name it Agent Orange. They said herbicides, and they said that the herbicides were completely harmless to warm-blooded animals and people, and invited people to come and watch. And all of a sudden, the goat kids were being born with cleft palates, deformed backs, one born with 3 legs, one child was born with no brain tissue.
The successful legal battle in Globe set a precedent for others to sue the government and the chemical companies for product liability. On January 8, 1979, a class action suit in Agent Orange product liability litigation was filed against 7 U.S. manufacturers of Agent Orange, including Dow and Monsanto. It was settled out of court for $180 million. The records were sealed, and the chemical companies did not accept liability. Then, in 2003, Vietnamese victims brought suit. Judge Jack Weinstein, who decided the 1979 case, dismissed this suit, saying, "Agent Orange was used as a defoliant and not as a poison to target humans, and did not violate international law, and the U.S. government has sovereign immunity and cannot be sued." The global impact of this invention is great. Economically, much of the world's economy revolves around chlorine chemicals. Every 10 seconds a new chemical is discovered, and new products enter the market at 3 per day, most insufficiently tested. Companies have become rich, and with wealth comes power. The health costs associated with Agent Orange are astronomical. Chemical cleanups are expensive. General distrust makes it harder to sell genetically engineered food in the global market. Contaminated areas reduce the market value of property and investment. At the same time, payments by chemical companies for damages have been minuscule. Politically, multinational corporations enjoy increased political clout, which has allowed them to cover up vital detrimental research for decades. The government became complicit in the cover-ups, as corporate employees were frequently appointed to crucial positions on regulatory boards. Elections are influenced by corporate money, and studies are often performed by the very corporations that produce the chemicals under study. Socially, fewer people trust corporations and government to be ethical and moral. An ecological nightmare has been created in Vietnam, where it may take 150 years for the mangroves to return. Dioxin continues to contaminate the global food chain. We carry a significant body burden of chemicals, a violation of human rights. Since the early 60s, and especially since the publication of Carson's Silent Spring, attitudes have been slowly changing about the risks and responsibilities associated with chemical products. Legally, class action suits are now more acceptable as it is for lawyers to advertise their services. Product liability has changed, making manufacturers liable for their products, no matter how they were distributed. Finally, juries frequently now award both compensatory and punitive damages. Dow and Monsanto no longer produce Agent Orange, and herbicides sold to the public must have labels disclosing their contents. But the biggest change must be ours. As Galston observed, "Any discovery is morally neutral, and it can be turned either to constructive ends or destructive ends. The choice is ours."